Hey, security peeps, we are live with another edition of Breaking Into Cybersecurity, and it is CISO Thursdays today. I am Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter, helping awesome leaders hire great talent. And we have an awesome CISO with us today. Super excited to have her. But before we introduce her and before we introduce my wonderful co-host, I want to make sure that everyone subscribes to our channel. So we're trying to build our YouTube subs. So please subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube when we go live, and make sure you do that, please. So as I shared, I'm Renee Small. I'm going to introduce my co-host, Chris Foulon. Say hi to everybody, Chris.
Hey everyone, security consultant, career coach, and I would also add, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast medium as well. We'll be moving providers soon, so we'll notify you when that happens. But in the meantime, just subscribe wherever you can find us.
Thank you, sir. Adding in where I always leave out and forget. So our awesome guest today, we have one CISO in the house, Monica Verma. Monica, please introduce yourself.
Hey folks, hey everyone. Thank you for having me on the podcast show today. This is Monica. I work as a CISO, and I've worked as a CISO before in the finance sector. Today I work as a CISO in the health sector, critical infrastructure everywhere. That's what's cooking. I have my own podcast show, which is We Talk Cyber, my blog, Monica Talk Cyber. Well, you can follow me and subscribe to Monica Talk Cyber everywhere. It's website, it's YouTube, it's Instagram, LinkedIn. Just find me there. You'll find me there. Yes. Lovely. Perfect. And I'm very, very, very happy to be on the show today.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say we're excited to have you on. We love bringing on CISOs from different sectors so that they could talk about the different challenges in their sectors, because it's one thing to be a CISO for a product company or a consulting company. Once you get into healthcare and other critical areas, then it becomes a little different. So I think it brings a good depth to our audience.
I agree. So, Chris, you want to kick off with the first topic that we're going to talk about today?
So,
the world's been talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, the Colonial Pipeline, is that the one that you're referring to?
Are you sure? Is that the one?
True indeed.
I mean, there's many out there.
Yeah.
It was just released that they actually paid $5 million.
They did?
Yeah.
They just came out. Okay.
Within hours of the ransomware event, they paid $5 million to the malicious actors to try to free their system. But that goes to show you, even when you pay the bad guys, you still have to restore your service. So if you don't have a good DR plan to begin with, paying the ransom doesn't help much anyway. From a healthcare perspective, how would you say that other hospitals are dealing with similar challenges? You don't have to speak for your own company. You could talk for the industry as a large.
I mean, in general, if you think about critical infrastructure from different sectors, right, the challenge really is the convergence of IT and OT. It's massive, right? It has been massive the last years. And now, as the attack surface has grown tremendously, it's gotten more complex. You've gotten much more complex supply chains. You've gotten much more complex value chains. And I mean, you just also maybe read about, not very recent, but last year when the vaccination started, there was attack on the documents, the IP for the vaccinations, right? Breaking onto the supply chain there. So, I mean, we're seeing more and more ransomware attacks. We're seeing more and more breaches when it comes to critical infrastructure. And what's interesting is that it has moved from just availability to also confidentiality perspective. It's both in the terms of, when you have a ransomware attack and then they encrypt stuff, that's where it started. Initially, it was just mostly focused on availability. But now you see, I mean, it's a lot of this IP and everything, and they're just threatening to release that data because you obviously steal the data before you encrypt them, if you're smart. If you're a smart cyber criminal, you will do that. And when that's happening, then obviously now the matter is not just about operations. It's also about IP and critical information. So how do you deal with that? And some people are looking as if they can I mean, they can pay the ransom. I would never recommend that. For one, you are basically, I mean, there are both sides to it, right? From a pure business perspective, it makes sense. Okay, if I can give this much money to get something that's even more valuable, obviously it should be, if the math is right, then it makes sense. But then from a criminal perspective, you're obviously promoting that. That's one. But two, there is no guarantee that you will get that back. Also, in the terms of whether your operations, like you said, you have to have the DR plan, you have to get the operations back. But what about the data that has leaked as well? You can't really unleak it, right? How does that even work? So those are the challenges that I'm seeing, and we need to be more smarter in that. We have to move really from preventive. Well, we have to do preventive controls, definitely, but a lot of focus has to be on when a potential attack, let's say that, when a potential attack is happening or attack infiltration starts, how quick we are and how small is the window when you can actually detect them in real time. I mean, that's where we are still lacking. The other aspect is obviously OT has a whole dimension of, well, the impact is much, much, much huger, right? I mean, if you look at hospitals, we had the ransomware attack at the Düsseldorf Hospital in Germany. Allegedly, they said before, because of that, a patient died because patient could not be operated. They had to take them to a nearest hospital, which was, I think, 35 kilometers. Not sure how much that is in miles, but you can calculate that 35 kilometers away, which is quite a distance. And then, but later they found out, okay, the condition of the patient was really ill. So even if they operated, she would have probably died. Fine. But that could have been a very real cyber attack that caused a human death. It's not anymore unthinkable, right? So the consequences are high. The attack surface is more complex and gives a lot of room to the cyber criminals. And two other things that I can confirm as we're going forward, and I've been saying that for many, many, many years now, it's not just that we have to worry about nation state. Cyber criminals are really doing things, even if it's from money. I mean, they're doing things that are causing us all these byproduct effects of it. And financial is still the number one motive. So that just goes to say that.
Do you think that enough executives are aware of the confidentiality exposure now to ransomware? Like, I think everyone's so focused on, well, they'll tie up the infrastructure, but they don't have our information. And I don't think enough companies even understand what their crown jewels are to even be able to identify that it's been exfiltrated and alert on that before they even get the ransomware. So it makes the incident response even that much worse, because now you're like, well, was there a confidentiality breach? Because they don't have any visibility on that. And then
you don't know,
also
right?
trying to get the system back up in place.
Absolutely.
That's what I think one of the biggest challenges is too, like really understanding where your crown jewels are. I agree with you, Chris.
And I mean, even looking at the whole cyber kill attack and the cyber kill chain for ransomware attack, exfiltration happens before encryption, right? Otherwise, the data is not useful to the cyber criminals. That happens. Whether it ends up on the dark net or not, there is zero guarantee. Even if it's there, you don't know. So I think people need to start thinking about confidentiality when it comes to ransomware attacks, in addition to availability.
When do you think, executives or the masses will really start to take this seriously? Like, as we were talking about last week, and, every week it's something else, but now it's starting to impact, regular humans, right? Not just the cybersecurity world. My friends are all calling me like, wait a minute, we have this, security. Now because of this security situation, this cybersecurity attack, now we don't have gas. Now I can't get gas to put in my car. So we had this conversation last week around like the critical mass, like when will it get to a point where we can't turn the blind eye anymore? It can't just be another news cycle, and executives and, government leaders, like the true people who can make things happen, actually do something to, curb some of this, or at least get enough talent seriously baked up to be able to battle these types of situations.
I feel there are two things here. One, we are seeing, and one, we're not talking about at all. So the one that we're seeing are fines, right? Especially in Europe, when you have these data breaches, especially for personal data breaches. We are not there with critical infrastructure yet, but that's a good step forward. We need more regulations around fines for things that upset either privacy or cybersecurity for national security or critical infrastructure and these things, right? When you don't have the right cybersecurity elements or controls in place. Because this attack that happened, I mean, there was a patch. This was, from what I understand, it was basically unpatched system for which a patch was available. Complete negligence from the company, right? They should have done that. So in such cases, I believe, number one, it has to be fines, but then fines have to be somehow in accordance or proportional to the revenue. I mean, with the GDPR, for example, I'm taking example for privacy, but obviously it applies similar to security. We don't have that, but I would assume something similar would help as well. But if you look at the GDPR fines that have been given to Google and other American companies in Europe, at least, they are very, very, very low compared. There's nothing compared to their revenue, right? The maximum is 4%. That's max ever that can be. So I feel monetary and regulatory oversight with fines, definitely, which is proportional, has to be one. But then this is, again, not the only thing. Another thing I feel, which we are not talking about at all, is making them accountable. Because the thing is, cyber criminals are doing their job, okay? When you're talking about this whole dark side criminal gang that is behind this with the ransom as a service, they're partnering. I mean, how more easy can it be to understand it's a business? You have a ransomware as a service. You have partners that are basically buying that service and exploiting, right? They are in full-on business. Even if when I was in the finance sector, if you look at the Lazarus Group, that is a full-on finance business criminal activity, probably have their own HR, probably have their own finance, CFO, whatever, right? They are doing their job. So now we have to understand, hey, we have to do our job in the sense that you can't really, if you're trying to make cyber criminals accountable in whatever way, how do we make ourselves accountable? Who makes us accountable? So when we're talking about like the data of, if you're talking about data breaches, for example, and if my personal data breach gets leaked, it's the responsibility also somehow of the citizens to make sure that the government is held accountable for that, or the company is held accountable for that. When it's a matter of critical operation, like critical infrastructure, like in this case of gases, right? There has to be some penalty. There has to be some accountability that somebody has to take here in terms of why this happened. And you cannot put it on cyber criminals anymore. I mean, they're basically doing what their job is in that sense. So I feel it's more in terms of monetary fines and accountability, which we're lacking today entirely, right? Whenever we do that, we're talking a lot about attribution to cyber criminals. More than that, I think it should be who is held accountable, and somebody should.
And now, when you think about critical infrastructure, like the complexity added with having that OT equipment that's really designed to have a long lifespan, to be available 24/7, but when it comes to patching and vulnerability, they weren't designed like IT systems are to be able to update it and patched. How to phrase the question? How seriously do you think these companies are taking securing those systems while still trying to gain efficiencies for remote management and all the increased efficiencies that you can get through mass communication and everything like that, versus, let's just monitor it and manage it and worry less about securing it because it'll never happen. It's too complex for attackers.
I mean, it's varied. Let me say that. It's very varied. I mean, I worked at Siemens in Germany right after the SCADA happened. When SCADA happened, obviously, the whole company went like, oh, okay, we cannot have this going on. And every time an organization gets breached, obviously, then they have this heightened sense of security. Okay, now we need to do something about it. But I mean, a lot of organizations, there is no doubt, a lot of organizations still think they will never get attacked. This is not me. And that mentality is still there. So with OT is definitely more complex in the sense that, yes, how do you do remote management while patching and all these things happen? You cannot even do much, like you can't do active scans like you would do in an IT environment that would disrupt the operations. You can't do that either. But the thing is, let me ask these organizations this thing. Critical infrastructure and all these industrial sectors now are moving more and more into digitalization and cloud. Wait, when you're doing that already, should you not think about cybersecurity first? Because now what you're doing is you already don't have something. And this is what we went through. This is what IT went through. We went through a phase of where we had, well, fewer intranet, and then we had internet, but then we had just websites. It was not that complex, but we never got our basic hygiene in place. And then it just got more and more complex. We got more digitalization and everything. This is what's happening with OT. I think they need to take a page from our lesson and learn that when you go on with the digitalization and with the cloud and connectivity and everything, it's fantastic. It's needed. As a CISO, I support it, but think about the security, because it will just make your job even more harder. We are today in IT with a technical debt. That's what's going to happen to OT as well. So no, awareness, I believe, is not there to the extent there should be. And one of the keys when I say about how to manage this is obviously when we talk about, okay, detection has to happen, as I've said before, right? Preventive controls, absolutely, we need that. But we need to be better with detective controls as well and how fast we can detect. But I cannot emphasize this more. Awareness, awareness, awareness. You really need to understand in the context of OT, what are the assets? What are the risks? Because it's consequential. What are the consequences? It's substantial. Mm-hmm. And this is still missing in various organizations. I mean, I'm not saying everyone, but we can't say like everybody's there, but they take it seriously or even understand for that matter. I think it's not that they don't want to. I think it's just that awareness is lacking.
Isn't there an inherent technical debt to OT? I mean,
it is from IT at least.
Yes. From the day that it's released on the factory floor, it's probably 3 to 4 years old and unpatched from that day. So like that's an inherent risk when it comes to any technology in OT.
It is. Plus from IT. I mean, the convergence has already happened, right? So yes, absolutely right. So we have to deal with that. We cannot deny, because then what we're doing is that we're just making the attack surface more, well, larger and complex, but easier for the criminals with much more higher consequences and risks.
Let's pivot to the other side now. So we have the amazing super recruiter here. What are some of the things that we could do to improve like our hiring pipeline to tackle some of these complex problems from your point of view?
Okay, that's a very good question, because I think like we have to invest in people, and we have to, number one, please stop asking for 10 years of experience for someone, some entry-level job. Come on, can we just stop doing that? This is what my father used to tell me, and something that I learned from him. You will not get 10 years of experience in 3 years. You will get that in exactly 10 years. And if you got an experience in 3 years, which was somebody else's 10 years, then your 10 years are still different, right? So where you could be in 10 years, you will never be in 3 years, because that's where you're meant to be in 10 years. Can we respect that? That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of people that want to break into cybersecurity and break into leadership. Why are we not utilizing that talent? Why are we not investing in people? For me, it's like this: attitude, skills, experience. Because like you definitely need experience, sure, but attitude makes the most difference. I believe cybersecurity is like any other skill. It's not something that you're born with. You can learn. And obviously talent, the amazing people that we have waiting, breaking, I'm not saying that they should not. It's not like magically it will happen. They obviously have to invest their time in learning. Some of the times, obviously, you learn. The reason I say you have to learn is because to get the first experience, you need to have basic understanding. It always helps, right? If you understand the terminologies and you're trying to go in for your first job, I definitely recommend doing, like, I studied about cyber. When I was studying, there were no courses, right? I had cryptography. I studied cryptography, sure. But there was there was no courses around what was happening in the industry. So I actually learned myself web application security. I somehow convinced my cryptography professor from the university and Jeremiah Grossman to be my external supervisor on a master thesis on web application security that nobody did in my entire university, because this was not a thing that time, right? But this was just my way of engagement. So I believe people have to engage, and if you want, you will make into it. It is not that difficult, but hiring is definitely making it difficult, more than it should be. So we need people, invest in them, mentor them, help them break into cybersecurity, give them tools so they can actually get experience and learn, because these are the people that will become the leaders of tomorrow. Leaders are not just born in one day. You can't just have people popping into like 15 years right at the company. That just doesn't work that way.
What are some of the... Oh, go ahead.
Monica, you and I and Naomi and most of the CISOs that come on here, most agree with that. However, there's all of these open positions. It seems as though we are the minority, right? Because
very much possible,
there seems to be much more people who are interested in breaking in versus getting the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to what you think the challenge is, or, from a leadership perspective, from a executive perspective, from your peers that don't want to do it. What do you think are some of the barriers and some of the challenges? Because, we tend to bring in and talk to people who are like-minded, but I feel like that's still a small group, because if it wasn't, so many more people would be in.
Totally. I totally agree with that. And there are some challenges, both in terms of the myths that we have, or the stigmas, let's say that the stereotypes or stigmas that we have in the industry. One of them, I believe, is the biggest one, is that you have to be a technical expert to work in cybersecurity. You don't need to be a technical expert. Please, let me just break that, because the time when we started with cybersecurity 20 years ago, we had network. At some point we got web application, but that was like, and then maybe a bit of hacking. That was it. Today, it's a myriad of options within cybersecurity. There is so much you can do. So yes, you do. And don't get me wrong, you do need to understand technology, how it works, because ultimately we're talking about risks within cyber, right? And risks connected to people and processes. So you need to understand that, but you don't need to be a technology expert. That's number one. And I believe we need to talk to people, our peers, to help them understand that we need to break this stereotype within cybersecurity first. That's our job. The second challenge that I see, and maybe the most critical one, is networking. When you're not in the right network or the right groups, you often don't know about the opportunities that exist, right? You know a very few subset of opportunities that exist on a specifically publicized, on a public page or something, but a lot of hiring happens actually within network, people who just know from a word to another word. And how do you do that? How do you get to know that? So we have to break that barrier for more people to come in, to even actually be able to network and understand. And this is something I recommend, both from the people that are hiring, right? To be open to have people to network and not just be a closed group. So you just like talk to 5 people and one of those 5 people will get the job. And from the people who want to break into cybersecurity, you need to network. It is difficult, but it will be really, in the long term, really beneficial. And that's the sad part of it. A lot of the jobs actually do happen just through networking.
Yeah. And I think that happens, often outside of security too. Because prior to recruiting in security, I've recruited in a bunch of different spaces. It's just very, very interesting to me. Even, when Naomi, who invited you on, thank you, Naomi. We didn't even talk about the fact that Naomi and Chris aren't, and James aren't here.
We miss you.
We miss you. Unfortunately, they're both not here today, and both had, conflicts. But Naomi talks about internship opportunities, and so outside of everything, Monica, I 100% agree with everything you're saying in terms of the networking opportunities and the things that happen. Where I see my perspective is that I've seen that in other areas as well. Like I used to hire tax accountants and actuaries and standard IT people, Java developers, all that kind of stuff. And other areas where there's networking going, and everything is not about posting the positions. And sometimes people get hired behind the scenes from within, and you talk about the hidden job market. So that aspect of this is not new. That's why it's so interesting to me. And even I can remember, I don't know, 15 years ago, probably, where there was a very, very challenging environment around tax accounting. And I know this in particular because I was recruiting in this space. I was in financial services, and you couldn't really find tax accountants. And the leaders understood this. The leaders were like, tax accounting is a space where you can't really find a lot of talent. And they knew, and they talked amongst themselves, like they would get in the IIA or whatever the different organization is for accountants. And they all got to more or less started chatting with each other, like, executives do and leaders do, like how you see those recruiters talk to each other. And they said, okay, we're going to grow our own. And we're going to bring people in and we're going to go to the schools and get accounting majors and interns and grow our talent from within. And it was just understood. It was this they don't expect people to have this, like you said, 10 years of tax experience for this level job. They know it's difficult to find. So it just seems that there's this very, what Naomi talks about, elitist, some of the stuff that you said, it's just so interesting.
Elitism, of course. There's a lot of that in cybersecurity. That's the biggest problem. And also the thing is, like, when you're having these internships, right? I would recommend people to do that. I mean, that's fantastic for you to get good resources for obviously not paying, like, you don't have to pay too much money for that. You get at a much lower cost. You get fantastic talent. They obviously learn a lot, but very, very important, pay them the right amount. Don't underpay them. I mean, it's the work they're doing for you nonetheless. And it's still much more profitable to you, right? Then why do people not pay? Because if I think we would have much more paid interns and paid internships and all these programs, a lot of people would be coming and getting this experience. And we would have more and more people actually coming into cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's a lot of elitism in our cybersecurity. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, and the example of that was technology, right? A lot of people think, like, yeah, if you're not a technological expert, then you don't belong in our community. That is elitism, nothing else.
Right. So, Monica, we are going to actually wrap it up at this point, at the 30-minute mark, because Chris has to run, and we know we were trying to keep it pretty short by Chris. Chris has to run. And we were going to keep a short conversation going today. So we're at the 26-minute mark. So, we have a couple more minutes. If anyone is on and watching and has questions, usually we have a pretty lively discussion. Rolanda chimed in here and said, thank you for having me. So that's great. And another person was here to say morning and good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, Monica, I really appreciate your perspective in the space, because the part of it that's really fascinating to me, and I guess bizarre actually probably is the right word, is that it makes it seem like this hasn't been done in every other industry. It hasn't been done. They act like, like you have to be born into, you come out of the womb as a cybersecurity professional.
No, you don't. No skill. Absolutely. That's what I said. It's a skill. You can learn it. There's nothing magical about it. Let's say it that way.
Right.
It's fantastic once you're in it.
Yeah.
But it's not undoable. It's not like completely magical that you cannot do it. It's not like requires whims and prayers and stuff. What you need is really just learning. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree. It's the leaders that seem to have a challenge with this. The people who want in. The recruiters are trying, we're happily trying to get them in. And all of us, this little world of ours, we all preach from the same, in the same space. So it's always interesting to hear if you had heard of different perspectives and, why people think that this stuff is just, so difficult and they can't build people like every other profession. So
I'm not sure why cybersecurity comes from it started or grew from technology experts, right? I mean, initially Correct. When you had the intranet and the DARPA and the internet started, but then majority people, I would say 99% of the people, and don't quote me on the statistics, but I would guess that one would be people who knew technology and were technology experts, right? That's how it started.
Right.
But as I said, a shift has happened and we are not in peace with that shift. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
The shift that has happened is 20 years ago, it was really focused on just the technology aspect of information security. It has moved a lot to the non-technology aspect of information security, and we're just not making our peace with that. That's the biggest thing that has happened and that has changed, which we are not recognizing.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I think that's exactly where it is. There's this underlying, group of folks that came up from 20 years ago that all came through IT. They all believe to be a true security professional. That has to be the path. You all need to have development. You all need to have computer science. You all need to have had a technical background, and have not evolved yet into what it truly is today. So,
and let me give you a very direct experience. I mean, this is from my own personal and professional experience. I come from a hacking background. I come from a development background. So I come from a technology background, right? I've been in leadership positions now for 7+ years. I literally had to unlearn, or let's say not utilize that technology part of the brain that was so deep into it. I had to unwind myself from it to really be able to be an effective CISO. So actually, it's not necessary that you have to know that. I mean, it could actually even be not so good, especially if you want to break into leadership and you want to be an effective CISO. You have to unuse that very deep technical understanding or part of it, or you have to turn it off a bit. You have to go down a notch a bit. And that's kind of like, that basically tells you how important it is to understand the other aspects outside the technology, and how information security is not about technology and not just about technology.
Right. Not just about technology. Awesome. So, someone else.
If anybody has questions, please.
Yes. They said, thanks for your time. I'm trying to pull up sometimes on LinkedIn Lives, and I don't know if this happens to you, Monica, on your LinkedIn Live, but, you get the comments. They don't always come through here. They show up on LinkedIn Live, or they show up on LinkedIn, but they might necessarily show up here. But so far, so Nick, this is Nick Percal. So he says, thanks for your time today. Always great to hear from you all, and Monica too. So
lovely.
Awesome. So Monica, I have to say, I really, really, really appreciate you being here, and being a part of our CISO Thursdays today. This was fascinating, great information, awesome topics. To have someone with your background, having all the various skills that you bring to the table, come and join us. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everyone else, like I said, we were going to keep it short today, and we are going to have another CISO Thursdays next week, obviously, and then look out for anything else we have that's showing up in the next within the next week. So, everyone, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your week, and take care.
Take care, everyone.